I had recently returned from a 3-day business trip to Chicago. The journey was tense, filled with never-ending meetings, late-night planning over drinks, and little time for rest. I was exhausted yet relieved when I boarded my flight home. I had a straightforward plan: come home a day early to surprise Emily and enjoy a peaceful evening together, something we hadn't had in months. The plane landed at 4:45 p.m., and I didn't let Emily know I was coming. In the past, we enjoyed surprising one another with impromptu gestures to maintain the spark, but these days, it feels one-sided. Emily had grown aloof. She wasn't mean, just distant. Conversations that used to go on for hours had been replaced by courteous, surface-level interactions. Nevertheless, I reminded myself that it was a stressful phase of work. I got home shortly after 6 o'clock and noticed something strange as I approached the house. There were many people in the driveway, and the area was crowded with unfamiliar cars spilling out into the street. From inside, there came the faint thump of skewed party music. With my suitcase still in hand, I entered the front door on a Thursday evening, frozen by what I witnessed. The living room, our space, was crowded with strangers lounging on the couch, sipping beverages and laughing loudly. Wine glasses and beer bottles were strewn across the coffee table. Emily was in the middle of what appeared to be a scene from a collegiate comedy movie. She was wearing a short black dress and stood by the fireplace, someone I didn't recognize. Her back was to me, her hand resting casually on the arm of a man I had never seen before, laughing as he leaned too near. When everyone realized I was standing there, the room fell silent. For a brief moment, Emily's expression conveyed amazement and worry as she whirled around, then swiftly masked it with a false smile. "Jason," she spoke in a high-pitched, brittle voice, "you're home early." The man behind her shuffled uneasily. Emily didn't come over to say hello or offer an explanation. Instead, she stepped forward as if trying to erase what I had just seen, her body obscuring my view of the man. I looked around the room and responded with icy eyes. "What's happening?" I asked. "It's only a small gathering," she replied. Her voice was too informal. "How far away are some of your buddies from?" I interrupted. "I don't recognize anyone here, and I most definitely don't know him." I pointed past her at the man, my voice louder than intended. Emily's expression hardened. "Can we not do this now? You're making a scene." I chuckled, a sour, humorless sound. "I'm making a scene, you suppose?" I lowered my voice and moved closer. "After being away for 3 days, Emily, I come home to this." Her gaze flitted about the room, evidently uneasy with the crowd. Her fingernails dug into my flesh as she seized my arm. "Let's have a conversation upstairs," she hissed through gritted teeth. I firmly pulled my arm free and said, "No, we will have a conversation here, in front of your friends." There was silence in the room. Everyone was watching us, and I didn't care. I fixed my eyes on hers and demanded an answer. She started to say something, but the sound of the front door slamming interrupted her. As I turned in time to see the man running down the driveway and his car speeding off into the night, the dam burst within me. "Do you wish to identify that person?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of betrayal and rage. She didn't apologize in her response. There was no explanation. It was an order. "Leave." Her voice was icy as she spoke. I briefly believed I had misheard her. "What? Did you hear me?" Her eyes narrowed as she spoke. "I don't want you to ruin everyone's evening at my house. Simply leave." My entire being was filled with shock as I gazed at her incredulity. My wife wasn't this. Something inside of me suddenly exploded. Even if this wasn't the lady I married, I extracted a folded piece of paper from my coat pocket. I had no intention of disclosing the letter. Inside tonight were the findings of a private inquiry that I had ordered while I was traveling. After being suspicious for weeks, I was finally thankful I hadn't disregarded my intuition. Without saying a word, I gave her the letter. As she read it, her cheeks lost their color, and she became pale. She looked up at me after she was done, her face displaying a mixture of fear and rage. "What? What did you do?" she muttered. "I discovered the truth. It's your chance to decide how much of it you want these individuals to hear," I stated simply. Her reaction was swift and poisonous. She grabbed the letter and slammed the door in my face after crumpling it in her palm. The sound of the door slamming reverberated in my ears, and I realized then that this was not going to end quietly. With my luggage still in hand, I stood on the front porch. I was momentarily paralyzed. My chest was constricted. I was breathing heavily. In my own home, she had shut the door on me. There had been no attempt by anyone inside to stop her. Instead, they pretended nothing had occurred, and I could hear anxious laughter and whispered conversations. I didn't leave, but the insolence of it all burned like a wildfire in my chest. Rather, I waited while leaning against the doorframe. I refused to let her cut me off from this discussion. Not after what I discovered. Not tonight. She crushed the letter in her hand, and I remembered. My weapon was that letter, and I wasn't finished using it. I had impulsively engaged the private investigator after experiencing uneasiness for weeks. The detective confirmed everything I had suspected about the man she was with tonight with a file, pictures, timestamps, and receipts in less than a week. He wasn't the first. He was only the latest. She was there when the door suddenly sprang open. Emily's face was a mask of icy rage as she stood in the doorway. To avoid being overheard by the partygoers, she closed the door behind her as she went outdoors. "You followed me," she growled, her voice low and poisonous. "Yes, I did," I replied calmly, though I was anything but calm on the inside. My hands were shaking. My heart was thumping wildly. I was afraid it would pierce my ribs, and guess what? As it happens, my intuition was correct. As though to see if anyone was observing us, her gaze flitted to the window. "It's low, even for you, Jason." "For me?" I responded, raising my voice. She crossed her arms, leaned against the doorframe, and curled her lips in a smug grin. "You've been sneaking around behind my back for God knows how long, and I'm the one who's low," she said. "Do you know what's wrong with you? You've always been paranoid. You're too preoccupied with worrying about issues to realize how miserable you've made this marriage." Stunned, I repeated, "You're cheating on me, Emily. You invited a man to stay at our house. You hosted a party during my absence. What specifically am I the issue here?" "You're quite dramatic," she said and rolled her eyes. "You're acting as though I killed someone at a party." Anger rose in my throat at the thought of a party that was both sour and scorching. Stepping closer, I said, "How about the receipts from the hotel? The pictures of you and that guy from the coffee shop last month? The late-night meetings? Was it only the second party?" Her face turned a little pale, but she soon recovered and said with contempt, "You are pitiful." I replied, "Is that your justification for choosing to mess around behind my back since I didn't make you happy enough?" "Believe what you want," she said, turning to face the door, her visage hardened. "I don't have to give you an explanation." Before she could go inside, I took hold of her wrist enough to stop her, but not too forcefully. She stopped, glaring at me. "We're not finished," I spoke aggressively. "You will be completely honest with me. Then, Emily, you'll explain to me why in the world you believe I should be the one to go." She jerked her arm out of my grip and gave me a glass-cutting stare. "Do you want the truth, Jason?" Her voice was chilly and piercing. "All right. To be honest, I've been over this marriage for years. You're predictable and uninteresting. I didn't think you'd even notice. You make everything about yourself." Her words struck me with the force of a sledgehammer. I started to reply, but she cut me off before I could do so and stepped closer to me, her voice already rising in volume. "I'm not sorry. Feel free to do what you please. I have no regrets. I'm done, so take your little letter, your righteous rage, and do whatever it is you need to do." She pivoted and strode back inside, slamming the door shut once more. I didn't follow her this time. Instead, I stood on the porch, staring at the closed door, my thoughts racing. Like a broken record, her words replayed themselves in my mind. "I'm not sorry. I have no regrets whatsoever." Something changed within me. The heartache and shock were still there, but something else, something colder, had joined them. She was completely mistaken if she thought I would simply leave the porch without saying anything. Inside, my mind was rushing with emotions that clashed like storm clouds. I felt betrayed and embarrassed, but most of all, I was angry. Her words kept repeating in my mind, "I'm not sorry. I have no regrets whatsoever. She was okay with me leaving, but not before I destroyed her fantasy world. With my palm hovering over the door handle, I took a step back toward the door. I could hear laughter and muted music. The thought of her returning to her small party, smiling and drinking as if nothing had occurred, burned within my chest. I opened the door and went inside. As everyone turned to stare at me, the room became silent. Emily froze in mid-laugh while standing by the kitchen counter with a glass of wine. For a brief moment, a flash of wrath replaced her arrogant grin. "What are you doing?" she snarled, putting down her glass. "What am I doing?" I loudly and steadily shot back my voice. "What are you doing, Emily?" "Hosting a party in the home we co-constructed. The room was completely quiet while you were skulking around with a stranger. Everyone was staring at us now. There was enough tension for a knife to cut through." Emily hastily covered her flushed face with a false smile. "Stop making a fool of yourself, Jason," she said, her tone full of disdain. "Would you mind cooling off?" "Oh, I'm all right," I murmured as I moved farther into the space. I took my phone from my pocket and raised it. "Actually, I'm really awesome. I have receipts. Do you want to see them? Do you want your pals to see them, Emily?" She didn't back down, but her eyes widened a little. "You're acting absurdly," she said through clenched teeth. "Am I?" I turned to face the astonished guests in the room. "How or did she tell you about her brief meeting at the Marriott last month?" "She was too busy working late with him to attend a supper with me." Murmurs and gasps echoed through the audience. Emily's meticulously crafted facade was disintegrating before my very eyes, and I had no intention of stopping. Jason came to a halt. She lost her temper and raised her voice. "No, I believe I'm only beginning." I spoke in a firm yet piercing tone. "You see, when I was out of town, I hired a private investigator. Emily brought him here when she thought I wouldn't notice, but it turns out that she's been really busy with late-night meetings and lunches. Why don't you disclose the truth to everyone, Emily, or should I?" An angry mask covered her face. Her hands at her sides were now balled into fists. The space was still. Everyone was awaiting her answer. "You are pitiful," she spat. At last, her voice trembled with rage. "Do you really believe you can come in here and make me seem bad? Jason, these folks are my pals. They are familiar with me. I'll be believed over your foolish little research." I stepped forward, my voice trailing off. "Then, like a coward, explain why the man you were all over before fled." The muttering became louder as soon as I spoke. Her friends were now looking at one another uneasily. Emily was aware that her confidence was eroding. "My time is not worth this," she said at last. She picked up her wine glass and turned to face the kitchen. "It's worth mine, I see," I said, following her. "It wasn't before you wanted me to go, okay? Everyone here is well aware of your identity. In case anyone was wondering, the man she was with tonight wasn't even the first one." I turned back to the crowd. "For months, she has been seeing other men while I was out of town working really hard to support us. Here, she was transforming our home into her own playground." Emily's friend, a blonde wearing a sequin top, let out a loud gasp. A second man began to edge toward the door, as if he'd rather be somewhere else. "Jason," Emily slammed her glass against the counter and yelled, "Enough." "Emily, no," I said, now speaking calmly. "It's enough that you insult our marriage, lie to me, and then try to paint me as the bad guy. Are you really under the impression that you can get away with this?" She rushed past me and made her way to the stairs. "I've finished this," she said, having lost her temper. "Excellent. Since I am," I called after her. The room was oddly quiet as she vanished upstairs. The visitors shifted uncomfortably. A few mumbled justifications. I let them go without stopping them as they started to leave. Allow them to carry the tale with them. I turned to face the door again. My baggage is still in its original location. Despite my trembling hands, I was resolute. She desired my departure. I would depart, but I wouldn't be departing in silence or without anything. Not quite yet. She stormed off upstairs, but I followed her. We couldn't leave her to ruminate, make up stories, and plan her next course of action. If there was going to be an end to tonight, it would be on my terms. With every step I took, the steps creaked under my weight. now contaminated by the knowledge that they had meant nothing to her, a recollection of the years we had spent in this house, including late-night conversations, Christmas mornings, and lazy Sundays, whirled in my head. I pushed open the ajar bedroom door without knocking. With her back to me, Emily was frantically tapping on her phone while perched on the edge of the bed. When I walked in, she didn't even bat an eye. "What? Trying to figure out how to manage this by texting your tiny boyfriend?" My voice asked, sharp. She didn't raise her head. "Jason, you've got your point. Now leave me alone." "No," I replied firmly as I entered and shut the door. "We're not finished." At last, she set her phone down and looked up at me. Her face was stern and unforgiving. "What are you looking for from me?" "I apologize." "All right. I apologize, Jason. I apologize if you were unable to maintain my interest. I apologize. You were too preoccupied with being the ideal husband to notice my unhappiness." I didn't flinch, even though her comments were like venom, each one stinging deeper than the one before it. She wouldn't get the satisfaction from me. Not happy. I crossed my arms once again. "You believe that justifies your dishonesty, infidelity, and complete disdain? Why didn't you simply leave if you were so unhappy?" She gave a sour laugh. "It gave you the joy of being the victim." "Thank you, but no." I was astounded to see how icy she had grown. The person I believed I knew had vanished, and this stranger had taken her place. "You're a brave person." I shook my head and continued. "Emily, I've only ever been loyal to you. This is how you pay me back for everything I provided you." She rolled her eyes. "When passion is absent, loyalty is meaningless. You're predictable and uninteresting, Jason." I required more. "More?" My voice was a bark. "Getting up so you can ruin our life and marriage? For what purpose? An affair? A couple of exciting moments?" "You are pitiful." Anger flared in her eyes, and she sprang up to confront me. "Don't believe you're so much superior to me?" "You're not," she snapped. "You're needy, domineering, and so engrossed in your own little world that you failed to see that I was drowning." "I didn't hear from you." I shot back. "I had no chance to make any corrections because of you. You just decided to ruin our life behind my back. Emily, you're to blame, not me." The room was quiet for a while, the tension between us heavy and oppressive. My fury boiled as she then grinned cruelly and bitterly. "Don't think you've won?" Her tone was brimming with irony as she spoke. "I feel ashamed in front of my friends because of you. Like a hero, you called me out, but let me tell you something, Jason. You will not escape this unharmed. Do you desire war? All right, let's go to battle." Her remarks were like a blow to my head. She had no regret in her heart. I had no regrets, just resoluteness. "Do you truly believe that this is a game?" I spoke in a chilly, quiet voice. "Well, Emily, let me tell you something. I don't lose." I slammed the door behind me as I turned and left. Even though my hands were shaking and my heart was racing, I continued. I went downstairs, picked up my bag, and walked out of the house. I stood in the driveway, gazing back at the house that had been my haven, the night air cool against my face. She believed she had won by evicting me and attempting to exert authority, but she was unaware of what lay ahead since this was far from done. It's unlikely that I sat in my car in the driveway with my head racing and the engine running. Emily would want me to go now with my tail between my legs. She would anticipate that I would lick my wounds, allow her to take charge of the story, and then slip into obscurity while she portrayed herself as the victim. That was never going to occur. I now had a purpose since I had the letter, the proof, the receipts, the pictures, and the identity of the woman. The marriage was no longer being saved by this. That had long since passed away. This was done to prevent her from leaving and getting hurt. It was almost instinctual to make the initial move. My phone rang, and I called the private investigator. "Jason," he responded in a firm, businesslike voice as he answered on the second ring. "What's new?" "The time has come," I said simply, and after a little silence, there was a silent understanding. "I get it." Every scrap of dirt was filed by the investigator. He had discovered well-structured images, videos, and even text messages that he had recovered from Emily's burner phone. He was instructed to package everything and mail it to my attorney tonight. I then gave my lawyer a call. Aaron had been managing my business issues for years and was shrewd and brutal. He didn't hesitate to tell me what was going on. "I'll go to work on the papers. Divorce, complete asset protection," he remarked. "Yes, and I wanted a restraining order prepared for filing. I won't give her a footing if she makes any attempt." "I get it. I'll have something ready for you by morning," Aaron said. "Until this is resolved, leave the house. Let me carry the burden." I hung up, my hands shaking from adrenaline rather than fear. I was unaware of this aspect of myself. I wasn't done yet, though, with a calculating, emotionless resolution. I went to my email and wrote a message to all of the people Emily had asked to her party, including her closest friends and relatives. The truth about Emily was stated in the subject line. The email's body was straightforward. A picture of her holding hands with one of her friends at a hotel bar, a receipt for a hotel room she had reserved under a false name, and a text exchange in which she boasted about finally being able to do as she pleases without Jason seeing are the most incriminating pieces of evidence I included. Read to all those involved. I'm sorry this was made public, but I think you all should know the truth. For months, Emily has disrespected the life we created together, lied, and cheated. She was entertaining other guys at our house, in hotels, and anywhere else she felt she could get away with it while I was gone working to provide for our family. You will discover proof of her acts attached. I'm not interested in reconciliation or more talks. This is just to make sure that whoever chooses to tell the story won't mislead others. To distribute. Regards, Jason. I didn't care that it was nuclear. She had treated me like an afterthought, ruined our marriage, and humiliated me. She had just received war, if that was what she wanted. For the first time that evening, I felt a glimmer of peace, not tranquility, as I clicked send and watched the email vanish into cyberspace. This was not peaceful, but it was satisfying to know that I wasn't just taking things for granted. I turned on the ignition and headed downtown to a hotel. My thoughts were already racing about what tomorrow might hold. Emily was going to see a whole different side of Jason, regardless of what she had previously thought of me, and I wasn't going to stop until her idyllic little world fell apart. I awoke the following morning to the chilly, impersonal solitude of a hotel room. I felt a weird clarity in place of dread as the events of the previous night hit me, like a freight train. I picked up my phone to examine the damage because, for the first time, I had all the cards in my possession. The email had accomplished its goal. Responses poured into my inbox, including shock, incredulity, and barely veiled indignation from some of Emily's closest friends. The faithful would circle the wagons around her, which didn't surprise me, but the others had already begun to turn. One response caught my attention. It was from Emily's best friend from high school, Chloe. "I'm at a loss for words, Jason. Although I was aware of her unhappiness, I didn't anticipate it would be this bad. I want you to know that I do not approve of her actions. I'm available if you need someone to talk to." It was brief, cautious, and just what I had anticipated. Chloe has always been the diplomat of their friend group. She was not going to openly betray Emily, but she also wasn't going to stand up for something that couldn't be defended. After filing it away, I focused on the remaining fallout. Social media was already a flurry of activity. Once a meticulously managed exhibition of filtered perfection, Emily's Instagram was hauntingly silent. Her most recent postings' comment sections were overflowing with ambiguous queries and passive-aggressive jabs. Aaron called me, and my phone buzzed. "It's going fast," he stated without a preamble. "The divorce petition is prepared for filing. By noon, I must have your signature. Regarding the assets, we have marked the residence and safeguarded your accounts. She will be caught right away if she tries to do anything." "Excellent," I said, leaning back in the rigid hotel chair. "Is there anything else?" "Jason, she will fight back. She is the kind of person who doesn't just roll over. Be prepared for reprisals." His comments reverberated in my mind as I thanked him and hung up. Reprisal. She wouldn't let this go unnoticed, of course, but I was prepared. I got back in the car and drove home an hour later. I didn't plan on staying long. I only had a few things to grab. Emily's car was gone as I pulled into the driveway. Excellent. It was disturbingly quiet in the home. The stragglers of the party were still inside when I entered. Crumpled napkins, empty cups, and the subtle scent of spilled alcohol. It served as a cemetery for her careless actions. I went upstairs and made my way directly to the bedroom. My suitcase was still in the corner where I had left it the previous evening. Moving swiftly and efficiently, I started packing the things I would need. There were clothes, papers, and some personal belongings, but as I opened one of the drawers, I noticed a little, unlabeled box hidden under a stack of her scarves. I opened it after taking it out. There was a burner phone inside. As I turned it on and saw it spark to life, my heart was pounding. I was going through a plethora of texts, pictures, and call logs in a matter of seconds because the phone was not password protected. It was worse than I thought it would be. Each message was addressed to a minimum of 3 distinct guys. One message jumped out. Even though it was more incriminating than the previous flirting texts, sexual images, and even plans to meet at particular dates and locations. I believe he is aware of me. It's over if he finds out. Let's use caution. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. I was simmering with rage as I gazed at the television. She doubled down instead of coming clean since she knew I was suspicious. I was startled back to the present as my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Chloe. Her voice was strained as she said, quickly, "Emily is enraged. She is discussing contacting a lawyer and is aware of the email. Additionally, she is spreading accusations that you have been emotionally abusive and domineering." I clenched my jaw. Naturally, she attempted to change the course of events. "I appreciate the heads up. Be careful, Kurt Lay," I urged. Chloe went on, "When Emily acts like this, well, you know how she is and she's not thinking clearly." Without answering, I hung up. I was concentrating on the burner phone. This was my ace. My evidence that she was lying was more extensive than I had thought. I walked out of the house. The box was safely packed in my backpack. Emily desired to act shady. I basically had everything I needed to bury her thanks to her. It was a haze on the trip back to the motel. My head was racing with ideas. In my mind, every move and counter-move was drawn out like a chessboard. Although Emily had given me a hint, she was unaware of how far ahead I was in my belief that the burner phone was more than just proof. It was leverage. It spelled out her dishonesty, validated all of my suspicions, and, above all, showed that she had understood exactly what she was doing. After returning to the motel, I took a seat at the tiny desk and thoroughly examined the phone. A graphic, incriminating history of her adultery was depicted in the emails. One individual was very noticeable. His name appeared in almost every thread, Chris. His voice seemed too familiar. Even if they were inappropriate, his pictures didn't even come close to capturing it. Plans for their next meeting were discussed, along with snooping about the house and making fun of me for my lack of knowledge. They had even joked about how it was a wonderful cover for him to be in the house. As I read the messages, my jaw tightened. Would he still be there if I had returned home a few hours later? Would I have entered a worse situation? But I was completely taken aback by one particular message. "When will you tell him, Chris? Emily, you promised to stop it before Christmas." "Yes, I will," she replied, simply waiting for the ideal moment. He's currently too preoccupied with his job to notice anything. This was something she had planned. It wasn't a fling that went awry or a moment of weakness. She had been playing the ideal wife and planning the dissolution of our union while grinning in my face. Once more, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe calling again. I responded to her this time. Her voice was taut with urgency from the beginning. "Emily is aware of the burner phone. She's going crazy. She believes you will turn it against her." "She is correct," I said flatly. "Look, I understand your anger." "Furious," Chloe began, but I interrupted her, raising my voice. "Chloe, she's attempting to leverage this against me after degrading me, lying to me, and bringing another man into our house. Don't give me the lecture." "I'm not giving you a lecture," Chloe spoke hastily. "I'm alerting you. She's in a difficult situation, Kurt Lay. Emily doesn't simply roll over when she's confronted. She snaps. Leave her," I responded icily. "I'm prepared." Chloe paused. "What plans do you have?" "You'd rather not find out," I answered before hanging up. Over the next few hours, I meticulously planned out my next course of action. Copies were sent to my lawyer once the contents of the burner phone were copied to a safe drive. In case Emily attempted to further distort the facts, I also sent a few reliable friends a couple of screenshots so they could attest to my credibility. I had everything ready by the end of the afternoon. I had the proof gathered, the divorce papers prepared, and my next course of action planned, but I wasn't done yet. I grabbed my phone and made a single call. Emily wouldn't anticipate that I would get in touch with her mom. Jason. Linda's tone was kind but cautious. Even during Emily's and my difficult times, she and I had always gotten along. Hello, Linda. I spoke in a purposefully calm tone. I wanted to discuss something with you. It's crucial. A pause occurred. This sounds like a serious situation. Yes, it is. I need you to hear this, I said. Prior to Emily twisting it, for months, she has been unfaithful to me. I'm filing for divorce, and I have documentation of everything. Linda let out a gasp. My goodness, Jason. I'm at a loss for words. Are you certain? Indeed. I spoke aggressively. You deserve to know the truth, even if I'm not telling you this to offend you. Here, I'm not the bad guy. Linda remained silent for a long time. Regardless of what Emily might say, her voice was shaking when she finally said something. I no longer even recognize her. She has been so cold and aloof. I mistakenly believed it was simply stress, but it's more than that. I wanted to make sure you understood what was actually going on, I said. I appreciate you telling me. Linda spoke quietly. Thank you, but I'm not sure how I'll handle her. I experienced a peculiar range of feelings as I hung up the phone, including a deeper sense of loss and relief that Linda had believed me. This was no longer simply my battle. It was going to have an impact on everyone in our immediate vicinity. Emily had attempted to portray me as the bad guy, but things were starting to change. She desired conflict. She didn't realize how far I was prepared to go. Emily's meticulously planned life would fall apart when I made my next move tomorrow. The motel window let in the early sun, but it didn't provide much warmth. Driven by a restless resolve, I got up early. I was going to take charge today. The match had been ignited by Emily. I was going to burn it all down now. Aaron was the first person I called. The divorce papers must be submitted today. I want an emergency motion to freeze the house and our joint accounts. I added without preamble. She is unable to obtain anything. It's moving already. Aaron's response was fluid. She won't be able to move a dime by the end of the day without my office finding out. Excellent. There's one more thing, I said. I would like to publicly disassociate myself from her. People must understand that this is her doing, not me, so make a statement and leak it if necessary. Aaron hesitated. It's a brave move. It might make things worse. That's the concept. By the time I hung up, my strategy was well underway, I added. When I checked my email, Emily had not sent me any new messages. Rather, my first email blast received more responses. The majority were encouraging, while others were carefully neutral. One stood out. You don't know me, Jason, but I felt you should be aware that Emily isn't who she claims to be. For years, she has been doing this. She has done this to other men before, and you won't be the last. Tell me if you require any other evidence. I have tales to tell. Ryan. His tone sounded genuine, but the name was foreign. This was a novel discovery. I immediately responded, requesting further information. I made the decision to visit the house one last time while I waited. I wasn't there to pack or get anything this time. I had a message to convey. Emily's car was parked in front of the driveway when I pulled in. I took the burner phone out of my pocket and walked confidently to the door. I rapped once. In a fit of rage, she hurriedly opened it. Why in the world are you here? She spat. I came to speak, I said as I entered. Emily crossed her arms and followed me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. I've been sufficiently embarrassed by you. What more would you like? I turned to look at her face. Calm but icy. I want anything to make sense to you. This is no longer your game. The story is not yours to dictate. Emily, everyone is aware of who you are now, and things will only get worse. There was a glimmer of apprehension in her eyes as she sneered. You're playing a bluff. I flung the burner phone onto the coffee table after taking it out of my pocket. She knew it, and her face turned pale. Proceed. Read it through, I said. I've already sent copies to my lawyer and some of your pals, so you may relive every lie, every scheme, and every betrayal. They are entitled to the truth. Emily stared at the phone. Don't you think, Her hand shook a little. Then she lost her temper. "What a coward you are," her voice trembled as she hissed. "The fact that I moved on is too much for you to bear. You believe that damaging my reputation will make things better. Do you believe that anyone is interested in your sob story? If they feel sorry for me, I don't care," I replied. "Equally, all that matters to me is that people accept you for who you are." She lost her temper and sprang for the phone, but I intervened to keep her from reaching the table. "You can't take the simple route. Emily, you created this mess," I remarked. "You're going to reside there now." She didn't try to push by me again, but she glared at me while breathing heavily. She spat out instead. "You are pitiful." I may have smirked, but at least I'm not dishonest. My phone buzzed in my pocket before she could reply. I took it out and took a quick look at the screen. Ryan, the stranger who had contacted me previously, sent the email. "Proof attached" appeared in the topic line. I swiveled the screen in Emily's direction. As I opened the message, my smile grew. "Your history appears to be catching up with you," I remarked as she flipped through the texts and pictures that were attached, her face contorted in fear. "Who is that? Who forwarded that to you?" "You burned someone before me," I said, putting my phone in my pocket. "Your list of opponents appears to be longer than I initially believed." Emily's bluster vanished, and she appeared truly terrified for the first time. "Jason," she continued in an abruptly low, almost beseeching voice. "We can remedy this, please. Let's just talk about it, please." "No," I spoke in a steely tone. "Our conversation is over. Emily, you wanted conflict. You have it now." I turned and left the house without turning around again. It was more than a simple collapse. It was time to face up. Emily's frantic request replayed in my head as I walked out of the house. "We can remedy this, please." It was not an expression of regret. It was an instinct for survival. For the first time, she wasn't in charge when she noticed the walls closing in. Excellent. I climbed back into my car, opened Ryan's email, and took a long breath. The attachments, which included obscene images, voice recordings, and screenshots of chats, were incriminating once more. Ryan's account was unambiguous. Years before me, he had dated Emily, and the pattern seemed uncannily familiar: deception, adultery, and manipulation. The thing that most surprised me was a line in his email. She had moved on from him as coldly as she was attempting to move on from me now. I kept everything, but she was continuously underestimating me. She is the type of person who always believes they will get away with it. It was personal. Emily had also misjudged me. I thanked Ryan in my reply and asked if he would be open to talking to my attorney. His reaction was nearly instantaneous. "Tell me when and where. You have all the evidence, please." Although my case was becoming stronger, the legal dispute was no longer the only aspect of this. Making sure Emily couldn't use her lies to have a fresh start was the goal here. The fallout became more apparent as the day went on. My phone was ringing with calls and texts from friends we had in common, many of whom were upset with Emily. Mark said, "I'm very sorry, bro. I didn't know. Tell me if you need anything." Laura said, "I'm at a loss for words. She always seemed strange to me. I understand now." Chloe even made another attempt. "She's going crazy. She's calling everyone to get ahead of the narrative," she added. Jason said, "You are making stuff up to destroy her life," she told me. I laughed resentfully. "Give it a shot. I have enough proof to discredit her 10 times over." Chloe paused. "You're not incorrect, but exercise caution. When she feels stuck, she acts erratically." Even though I remembered her warning, I thanked her and hung up. Aaron contacted me later that afternoon to provide an update. The documents were filed. "The divorce petition is airtight, and the house and accounts are frozen," he claimed. "There won't be any flexibility for her." "Good," I replied, adding that the burner phone evidence had already been turned in for the case. It will be difficult for her to portray herself as a victim given the emails from Ryan and the schedule we've set. I had a brief moment of relief for the first time in weeks, but it was far from finished because at around 6 p.m., I got a text from an unidentified number. "You're engaging in risky behavior. Get out of here, Jason, while you can." My stomach rumbled. It was easy to figure out who sent it. Desperation was evident in the tone, a desperate attempt to scare me. Calmly, I answered, "Well done, Emily. I'll see you in court." I blocked the phone right away. My thoughts drifted back to the life we had created together, the vacations, the festivities, and the silent moments of laughter as I sat in the silence of my hotel room that evening. Now everything seemed like a well-planned delusion. She'd spent years honing this presentation, but illusions are only as good as people not paying too much attention. One final time, I pulled out the burner phone and gazed at the screen. It served as a kind of prize, a representation of my determination and her arrogance. I was just beginning, and Emily's idyllic little world was collapsing. I awoke the following morning to chaos. Notifications, calls, texts, emails, and pings from social media were all over my phone. The counterattack had been started by Emily. Her lengthy Facebook posts served as the first indication. It was just as dramatic as I had anticipated, brimming with martyrdom, vulnerability, and enmity. I never imagined having to do this, but I'm at my breaking point. By distributing false information about me and inciting others against me, Jason has been attempting to ruin my life. He has always been emotionally abusive, domineering, and cunning. No one who knows the true me deserves to be treated this way, even when I committed mistakes. I appreciate your help. Now I need you. The comments were divided more than before. Some of her relatives and acquaintances hurried to her rescue, vilifying me and repeating her charges. Others voiced skepticism or pointed inquiries, including mutual friends. Her techniques didn't surprise me. Playing the victim, fabricating a story, and relying on the fact that most people wouldn't pay any attention were all hallmarks of typical Emily. I was prepared at this moment. I gave Erin an update over the phone. She's going public. She's accusing me of emotional abuse, I said. Erin's reaction was cool and collected. This is what we expected. Remain true to the facts. Allow her to bury herself. It will be simpler to refute her accusations in court the more she overplays her hand. I made the decision to confront the matter directly after the call. I was careful to keep my own post factual and emotionless as I was writing it. Emily's most recent post has been viewed by many of you. I want to make a few clarifications, even though I accept her freedom to express her viewpoint. Her continuous adultery, which I can show, was the root of our marital problems. This has nothing to do with manipulation or control. It has to do with responsibility. I filed for divorce, and eventually the truth will be revealed. I am grateful to everyone who has helped me throughout this challenging time. I only included one picture, a screen grab of a text message Emily had sent from the burner phone in which she made fun of me for being unfaithful. Although it wasn't too disclosing, it was enough to make everyone who was listening question everything. The reaction was instantaneous. My inbox was flooded with messages of fury, curiosity, and support. Many people wanted more information, while others expressed shock that Emily could fall so far. But then there was an unexpected turn of events. Ryan sent me an email at about noon. After conducting his own investigation, he had discovered other skeletons in Emily's closet. They included proof that she had embezzled funds from a modest charitable organization where she had previously volunteered. Additionally, he discovered documentation of her being sued for breach of contract by a previous employer. Jesus, I mumbled while looking through the attachments. Emily had a much deeper pattern of dishonesty than I had thought. Aaron called me very quickly after I sent him everything. Everything, he said, is altered by this. His voice was piercing. We're looking at more than simply a divorce case if we can verify this. She might be charged with a crime. His words weighed heavily. Emily had always been careless, but this was more than I could have ever imagined. Verify everything and include it in the case, I said. Emily's Facebook post had begun to backfire by the afternoon. People were pointing out gaps in her story and posing queries that she was unable to respond to. Her lies grew more obvious the more she attempted to deflect. I got an SMS from Chloe. She's falling apart. Individuals are beginning to see right through her. Continue doing whatever you're doing. I just said, I will. I got another email that night, this one from the private investigator. He located the partygoer, Chris, and verified that Emily had been luring him in with promises of a future. It turned out that he was unaware of her marriage until recently, after she had divorced Jason and Chris. The investigator attached Chris's statement and texts. He was duped by Emily. One line caught my attention. Jason is not a concern. He's too stupid to understand anything. They strengthened my determination, but the words hurt. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't unaware, and I had power now. Emily's life was falling apart more quickly than I had anticipated. Her allies were thinning, the evidence was growing, and the lies were stacking up. Aaron and I would submit an updated petition tomorrow that included all of the information we had discovered. Emily was drowning in her desire for battle. Until every card she believed she had was torn from her hands, I would not stop. The storm grew stronger the following morning. Emily was desperate to keep her face intact, and her attempts to manipulate the story had gotten out of hand. Aaron, my attorney, called early to provide an update. She is submitting a reply to your request. She is accusing you of being emotionally abusive and undermining her career, he said. Given the data at our disposal, it's absurd, but it demonstrates the extent of her willingness. I massaged my temples and allowed her to delve further. Chris's statement, Ryan's emails, and the burner phone. You mean they're all lined up? Of course, Aaron retorted. Her credibility will be shredded once we present this in court, but there's something else. She's attempting to sell off assets, Aaron said grimly. She was found trying to move funds from your joint account to her personal account. She appears to be in a panic, even though the court order stopped it before the transaction was completed. It was a careless action that supported my presumptions. Emily was losing her mind, but the divorce was no longer the only issue. A ticking time bomb was the evidence of her embezzlement that Ryan had found. I knew that the local prosecutor's office would soon begin looking into it because Aaron had forwarded it to a contact there. I made the decision to increase the temperature by mid-morning. I gave Chloe a call. With caution, she asked, "What's happening now? Please do me a favor." Emily is still attempting to blame me for this, I said. Please speak with her friends who haven't chosen a side yet. Show them the screenshots from the burner phone. Allow them to witness the reality for themselves. Chloe paused. That's brave. Are you certain that you wish to go that far? I've already been accused of abuse by her, I said coldly. She is attempting to ruin my reputation. I agreed to handle everything, but I'm done playing the good side. The ripple effect started in the early afternoon. As she discreetly shared the evidence with important members of Emily's social circle, Chloe kept me updated via text. Lauren was recently shown the screenshots by Chloe. She's angry and claims she's finished standing up for Emily, she texted, after Katie and Chloe dubbed her a narcissist. Didn't anticipate that. Jason, the private investigator, called me in the interim. I know more about the nonprofit embezzlement case, he said. It turns out that because Emily consented to pay back the stolen money in a discreet manner, the organization never filed charges. I spoke with the director. They're prepared to make a declaration. Incredibly so, I whispered. Emily was unable to avoid the consequences of her carelessness. Later that night was the tipping point. When my phone buzzed, it was Emily, and I was sitting in my hotel room going over the last draft of our revised petition. After considering ignoring it, I chose to respond. What do you want? I said coldly. She paused before continuing, her voice wavered. Jason, we must have a face-to-face conversation. I laughed resentfully. You're kidding, right? Please, after all that you've done. Her voice cracked as she said, I mean it. I was wrong. All right, but we can resolve this. Simply visit the house. I'll tell you everything. I didn't believe the desperate, almost imploring tone she was using. I'll move on, I said flatly. Anything you want to say, you can speak through your attorney. Desperation gave way to wrath, and she snapped. You believe that you were so innocent and flawless. All right, let's wait and see when I reveal your true nature to everyone. I have dirt on you, don't you think? You don't think I'll utilize it? Proceed. Just know, Emily, I said gently, every action you take makes it more likely that you will run out of cards. Before the line died, she was silent for a long time. I steadied my hand and put the phone down. She made a last-ditch effort to recover control, but it was too late. She was pitted against the truth, the witnesses, and the evidence. Aaron and I would present everything to the court by the end of the week. Emily's money machinations and infidelity are falsehoods. When the truth was out, she wouldn't simply lose the divorce. She would lose everything. The air was heavy with expectancy and the courtroom was a silent maelstrom of stress. My lawyer Aaron and I were seated next to each other, and while he appeared composed, Emily was sitting across the aisle, her carefully manicured facade of innocence crumbling under the pressure of what she knew was coming. The proceedings started as soon as the judge arrived. Emily's attorney leaned into her story with theatrical flair in an attempt to portray me as domineering and emotionally abusive. They merely offered Emily's testimony as proof, not any actual evidence. A network of falsehoods intended to discredit me and defend her behavior. Aaron waited calmly, his expression firm and assured. He started taking apart their case piece by piece, starting with the burner phone. "Your Honor, this is an important piece of evidence." Aaron held up the phone as he spoke. "It includes call logs, pictures, and text messages that prove the respondent's adultery and her intention to mislead my client." He read out loud a few chosen messages, each one a dagger to Emily's made-up tale. Except for the occasional gasp from the little gallery, the courtroom was quiet, but that was only the beginning. Ryan's testimony was introduced by Aaron. He then went on to explain Emily's pattern of dishonesty and manipulation, including how she had deceived him, lied to him, and caught him off guard. His statements were composed but scathing, revealing Emily's true nature. Aaron's presentation of the proof of her stealing from the nonprofit was the last straw. He presented the director's statement, the payback agreement, and the financial discrepancies. Aaron came to the conclusion that this is not the conduct of someone who is abused or under control. My client and others have suffered greatly as a result of this habit of self-centered, careless choices. Emily's attorney attempted to protest, but the harm had already been done. With each admission, the judge's face became icier, and by the time Aaron was done, it was clear which way the balance was shifting. Emily attempted to project her typical bluster when she took the stand, but it was obvious that she was losing it. She gave vague answers. She tried to reroute and used a defensive tone. The blame was a failure. "Mrs. Daniels, could you explain why you tried to liquidate assets from your joint account after being served with the court order?" Aaron asked her directly at one point. Emily's calmness falters, utterly vacillating. "I was unaware of the order." "Weakly," she said. "Fascinating," Aaron answered sharply. "Here's the timestamp, displaying the bank alert alerting you." The transaction was stopped. She said nothing, her face pallid. It took the judge very little time to provide a decision. "The petitioner's arguments are overwhelmingly supported by the evidence," she stated in a strong tone. "The respondent's actions have demonstrated a clear pattern of dishonesty, infidelity, and financial irresponsibility. Consequently, I'm awarding Mr. Daniels the majority of the marital assets, including the property, and granting the divorce on the basis of adultery." When the gavel struck, I felt a weight leave my chest. I didn't give Emily another look, even though her face was a mask of shock and rage. Not only had I won the case, but I was also free of her poisonous web of falsehoods. As I left the courtroom, I experienced a peculiar spectrum of feelings, including relief, vindication, and even a small amount of regret for the life we had lost. However, above all, I felt prepared to proceed. Emily's lies ultimately destroyed her, despite her attempts to destroy me. Rather, this was my resolution, my fresh start, and I was convinced of one thing as I stepped out into the sunlight. I would never have to deal with her again.